get a clipboard. And we'll do cool pictures. Welcome to the Barnes House. My name is Brendan. I'm the Historic Preservation Chief for the county. And with me is Bill Backus. He's a Historic Site Manager of Brentsville Courthouse Historic Center and Bristow Station Battlefield. Because we don't believe in having, we want to give people a lot of big titles. This is really the second day we've opened the inside of the Barnes House. We did it for the opening as well. And the purpose of, thank you for coming, by the way. I hope you have a good time here. The weather's got a little bit better. It was cold this morning. The house is at a state and time when we've restored the exterior but not the interior. And once we start restoring the interior, you're never going to have a chance to see it like it is right now. So this is a really kind of an opportunity that we like to afford for all of our buildings, just because when we're restoring them, because it's a moment in time that you don't get back. So it's kind of exciting for us to have today to do this. The house is associated with an African-American family, and so it's February, so during Black History Month we wanted to take the chance to open it up. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at what we've done on the exterior, talk a little bit about the history of the house, or the family that lived here, and then go on the interior and show you what we're going to do. So hey Tom, how are you? So anybody have any questions before we start? Okay. Let's back up just a little bit so we can show you the envelope here. The house, and I'll pass this around. This is the house in probably the 30s, early 40s, and that's what we restored. In 2003, when we became involved in the building, it was in a junkyard on Route 234. It was actually the office for a junkyard on Route 234. All sorts of brake parts and stuff like that in there. Woman by the name of Lillian Gaskell, who was the past chair of the historical committee, African-American woman. She, a very accomplished lady. Her husband was a general in the Army and helped to integrate. Being a general in the 60s and 50s and 60s in the Army was probably pretty difficult. When he was down at Fort Lee, they integrated the schools in Petersburg. He walked his kids to school as an officer with his kids for the first day in the 60s there, early 60s. Amazing family. Well, she really had a passion for the Barnes House, talking about African-American history in the county, and she brought to our attention that it was going to be torn down as part of the road widening of Route 234. The county decided not to, it was owned by VDOT because of the right-of-way, and the county decided not to do anything, for many valid reasons. So Lillian went to the board meeting that we were going to say to our Board of County Supervisors that we were going to pass on this. Not me personally, I would have said, I'll save everything. But the folks ahead of me in line, and Lillian blessed them all out during Citizens Time, shamed them all. Not that these weren't great folks, and they were probably going to go along with saving it anyways, but she really spoke her mind. And I guess the reason I bring that up is because in a local government, every voice really does get heard, and every citizen has a chance to make a difference. So, and she's the reason why this house is here now. So I want to just kind of start with that. That's actually probably the second biggest takeaway from today. The first is this farm was 1797. This house. Originally or early on, it was owned by the Copen family. And they were slave owners. Slaveholders. Had a farm in Independent Hill. During the time before the Civil War and the Civil War, one of the families that they owned was the Barnes family. Jane Barnes and her 5 children. One of her children was Eppa Barnes, and he was young during the Civil War. After the Civil War and the slavery, a lot of farmers asked their former slaves to stay and work the farm. They still needed farm laborers. So the Copen family built a house for Jane and her family and asked her to stay on. At a certain point, Eppa left. Soon when he became old enough to leave, and a lot of folks left to find their fortune somewhere else. Well, he came back in the 1890s, married Amanda Barnes, and bought the Copen house. So he actually bought his former slave owner's house, which is, I've never heard that before in all my days of doing historical research. So that's a pretty incredible thing. And he amassed 300 acres, had at least 10 children, probably 11. and they all lived there with their grandkids in this house. And he lived till 1930. Really well known. Paid the poll tax so he could vote back when African Americans had to actually pay to vote. The white folks didn't have to, but the black folks did. He paid. He wanted to vote, and he was really well known, really well liked. Got lots of scrums with his neighbors over trespassing and fencing and all sorts of things. So there's a lot of court records that go back and forth. Not an easy time to be an African American. Not to say before slavery was either, but that time from the Civil War to the 60s was a difficult road to hoe, and they did it. That family prospered, including during the Depression. So, if we step back just a little bit, when we moved the house, there was a porch exactly like this porch, and a back addition exactly like the back addition we have now. They were in such bad repair we had to tear them down. We couldn't move them. We couldn't have got the house moved if we had kept those intact. So what we did is we've recreated it. We believe that this is from the 1918 time period. We found a mortgage taken out on the property to pay for repairs or renovations to the house. From the style of the porch, it tells us it's early 20th century. So we believe the porch, the back addition, and the chimneys were repaired. They had been all stone, and then brick was added to the top as a repair. And the windows and the siding will probably all change at that time. So what we tried to do, as I showed you in the photograph, is we're trying to go back to the way it was in that time period. We believe that the period of significance for the house, that's kind of how you interpret a house, is when was it significant, really is the Epa Barnes period, for the reasons I've already told you about. So we're going to interpret the house primarily as from the 1890s to 1930. So that's the way it looked in 1890s to 1930, so that's why it looks the way it does today. We've rebuilt the porch, we've rebuilt the chimneys, we've put new siding on the building to match the original siding. We fixed all the windows up. We've had to replace the doors. The door on your right, I always do that wrong when I'm facing people, is the original door. The one on the left is one we built. We actually were able to track down that left door, and then someone stole it from us. No. So it took us years to get the door back, just working with the folks at the junkyard, because they don't. The guys in the junkyard didn't like the county rule. So sometimes that's a problem. But then it was stolen from us, so we recreated that door. The back doors are new too, but they're built to look the same way. With the majority of the work, with the exception of the roof and the chimneys, was done by county work. Actually, county staff, historic staff, did the work. So, does anybody have any questions?
Now, are you saying this was the original house owned by the owner that he bought, or was this another home on?
No, this is it.
Okay, this was.
Yeah, we would call it the Cope and Barnes house to be accurate, but it's always been known in the community as the Barnes house, so we're not going to mess with the name. But the Copans owned it before the Barnes did. The Copans owned the Barnes. So watch your step back here. This place gets muddy. The chimneys are quote modern built. They're working. They meet all the fire code. The stone is from the original chimneys, though. We saved the stone. They used it to make the new chimneys. So there's 3 chimneys on this property. This is not a small house. This is not a poor person's house. This was a wealthy person's house, and especially when it was built in the 1790s. So we kind of had all the bells and whistles, including 3 chimneys. So. I want to quickly show you the back of the building. Again, this is the addition to it. This was the 2 doors in the back. That door went to the basement, and the other door went into the kitchen. So there were 2 rooms back here. There's a bathroom, a stairway going to the basement, and a kitchen. And I'll show you more when we get inside. I did want to show you the nails. You can see the nails that are put in here. The whole back hasn't been painted, by the way. We had to buy new nails, so this is a reproduction galvanized nail. Everything we do, we don't want to have to come back and do 30 years from now, because that would get old, especially with we have 30 buildings. So we try to buy, when we have to reproduce something, we try to buy that next level up. That, instead of pine, is cypress siding. So again, it'll last a lot longer. So we just try to do things to make old build. those of you guys who live in Montclair and our houses are all 40 years old, they're heck to maintain. I'm doing something every other day on it. Imagine 220 years old.
Well, the original foundation, was it stone?
It was. We did the facing of the stone now. That's a concrete foundation, but that's the way it looked.
So they hand dug out a basement? You said there's a basement in there?
Well, I think the basement was later. I only went in it once because the building was so structured. The back was so structured and sound, and I'm a thrill seeker. I don't really care most of the time, but I went down in that and looked at it for a few minutes and came out of it. It was just a mud pit. It was just.
Would it have been a full basement or just like a coal cellar?
I think it was more of a cold cellar because it was just one part that had been dug out later, and the door had been added. Probably in 1918 when they did the addition, they probably dug that out. And I'll show you inside because one side had a basement, the other side didn't. One side got a lot worse for wear because of the water in the basement than the other side did.
So this is original stone?
Yes, we bought that. We stored it with the house for 10 years. So the house was moved in 2003 to the landfill, which I hate saying that, but it was the closest, most secure county facility we could find. It has a big, huge fence around it. It has 24-hour security, so we felt that that's probably. Having said that, you don't really want to say, well, that house is in the landfill. It also the landfill does tours, bus tours. All the kids in the county basically go there. So the folks who give the tours like to say that this was the slave house. So it was never a slave house, but this whole thing in the community started about the slave house. Kids all over the place know about the slave house. It's like it's not a slave house. It was a plantation house, basically a small plantation house. So you'll hear that, and then you probably heard that before you even came out here today. But it was never a slave house.
Where did the house originally sit in relation to the landfill?
If you're driving down 234 and you get to the junkyard, so you're driving north on 234 towards Manassas, the fence for the junkyard's right here. It basically sits in the median of 234. Okay. That's where it was. It was half a northbound lane and half of the median. Okay. So we only had 3 months from the time the county decided to step in to move it. And I hope no one here is from VDOT. If you work for VDOT, raise your hand. Working with VDOT, I love it, but it does not happen in 3 months. Okay, but we were able to actually get them because they were so happy they were off the hook for tearing it down that we were able to we got them to move pretty quickly, and we were able to actually acquire the house and get it moved in 3 months, which is permits, police, VDOT, getting a place to store it, a house mover, tearing down the additions. It was 3 straight months of work. So any questions about the exterior?
The addition was put on in
I believe 1918, yeah. And I'll show you from the inside. We believe there was a smaller addition earlier than that. It was probably torn down when they put the 1918 addition on. I'll show you we call them ghost marks, clues to what the building looked like before. And we have a lot of ghost marks in this building. Don't worry about dragging dirt in here, it's messy. Anyone who would rather use the ramp, it's right there. You might guess. Plenty of room, folks. You wouldn't believe it, but there is. Now, Eppa and Mandy raised, like I said, at least 10, probably 11 children and a bunch of grandchildren in here. Every census from 1890 to 1940 has just a long list of names of people that lived here. We've not had a lot of luck so far talking with family members. There's got to be a lot of them around here if there's that many kids. We've a little bit better lately. We're just now starting to do a lot of research. When the building was in the, for years, we didn't even know what to do with the building. We didn't know what was going to happen to the building. We didn't do any research on it because we had other projects we were working on. So right now we're heavy into the research phase, which is where we're coming up with a lot of the lawsuits and things like that, where the neighbors were all fighting against each other to scratch out a living in post-Civil War Prince William County. Couldn't have been easy. This here is the front of the house right before we moved it. You see the porch had been right there. The thing that probably saved the house is when they put it in the, well, when they made it part of that junkyard, they put a new roof on it, because it was their office. And if you have a roof on a building, you're okay most of the time. And although they beat the crap out of the inside of this thing, that's a technical term, is that on TV? All right, it was still salvageable. So the biggest thing we worried about when we had to take all the plaster down is to find out if the structure would support moving again. When the library came along and they were ready to, the county was ready to move forward. So we pulled the plaster down. You can see there's a lot of original timbers in here. There's also a lot of stuff we've done to repair it. And primarily where the chimneys were, when we took the chimneys down, the chimneys were holding up the building. They were the main structure for the building. And that once the chimneys came down, the only thing really holding the building together was the peak of the roof. So there were two separate buildings, just two separate halves of buildings. So you see a lot of our timbers are in to bolster the chimney to support it. This place isn't going anywhere. We've got it bolted to a new foundation. It's on a concrete foundation. And you'll see where we had to replace some of the framing of them. I'd say about 60% of the framing is original on the first floor. 100% is original on the second floor. That is 100% 1790s building right there, which is pretty amazing. Again, usually a roof leaks, and you get a lot of problems up there. We have a couple issues, and you can see some of the, back over here, you can see some of the where water had gotten through. But in general, it's in pretty amazing shape. Once we're done with the tour, I'll let folks go up there. It's got a steep stair, so only a couple at a time, and if you've got young children, make sure you hold their hand. The reason the stair was that steep is because they didn't want to waste the space. Right? I mean, this is living space. You got to maximize it. So you just make the stair go straight up.
Is there any kind of termite damage?
Yes, that's actually a good point. The sill plate on this house is 100% new. The sill plate's just the box around the building that holds it to the foundation. Ours are about 8 by 12, which is kind of normal for this size building. We actually moved it with the old sill plate because we couldn't. It's on steel. We couldn't do anything. We're stuck. We were hoping it made it all the way here, but. Once we got it here, we got it over the new position for the new foundation. We replaced it piece by piece. And what we did for the sill plate is we don't like to come back and redo stuff if we don't have to. We asked Dominion Power, who's in the news now for negative reasons, but we asked Dominion Power if we could have a bunch of old telephone poles. And we took the telephone poles and we have a sawmill. And we milled them up to the 8 by 12s. So they're like, I don't know if it's creosote or whatever on there, but it's not going anywhere. So the foundation, the exterior of this building is all telephone poles. The floor joists on this side, this is the side that had that basement, that unfinished basement, that mud basement. They were all rotten and they were all twisted and turned. We were trying to save them, but when we put the building down on this new frame, it wouldn't work. It was like trying to stick a square into a round peg hole. We couldn't get it to sit down properly. So our carpenters pulled up all the flooring, and the flooring was this tongue and groove flooring that you see over here. Again, probably early 20th century, maybe a little later than that. And when we tore that up, we found the original floor underneath. And that's common. That's almost 100%. People aren't going to pull up the floor to cover it over. We don't do that today a lot. We just go over it with whatever we're going to put on top of it. We replaced all the joists. Again, we mill our own lumber, so we used oak that had been seasoned for a long time. Cut them up to. It's hard to buy dimensional lumber that fits old buildings because we have 2x4s that aren't quite 2x4s now. So we use our own, and you can see the joists here. When we put the floor back, we pushed all the good timbers to this side, or flooring to this side. We had a gap of about maybe 20%. So we filled that in with our own oak floor. The problem with this is it's dried since then. So we've got gaps in that. So when we get ready to finish the house, we'll have to pop that up, slide it in, and put something else here because we don't want to have these gaps. I mentioned the framing. I want to show one other thing here before we leave the room. You'll see this throughout the building. This is called mud nogging, and it is an insulation on the exterior of houses. Most use brick nogging, and they would just basically frame up the house, and before they put the plaster on, they just pack in used bricks. It's good for that.
By most, do you mean this time period, this area?
This time period, I'm sorry, yeah, this time period. It's good insulation. Now, brick is good insulation as well, but This is probably, I would say probably better than that. I would assume it's locally found in the farmer's yard. He had this pocket of silt or clay, mixed it together, and packed it in as bricks. And we thought maybe they dried the bricks. For years we thought, oh, they must have dried the bricks, cut them, and fit them in there, but they didn't. What they did is, when they got to the bottom of the siding, they put a couple courses of siding up on the building, then they put these tack strips here, and they put in almost like a pudding, because we've redone it, and that's how we know how it was done. And then they would pack it to the top of that piece of siding. They'd put a couple more pieces of siding in there, put more strips up, and they went up that way. If you could see the other side of this, you'd see where it's the same as the framing. You can see the wood grain in it and everything. So we lost a lot of it, but it's pretty cool stuff. This is stuff we recreated, and that's the stuff above it is the original. So there's another huge section in that room that we're gonna keep open so people can see it, like what we're doing today. But we've saved all the mud we had to take out, and by trial and error, we were able to mix it up to the consistency to make it work. The other thing is, once they did this, they'd have to keep the walls open for a while so it wouldn't mold. It'd have to completely dry out before they put the plaster on top of it. So,
When did the plaster go on? In the 1700s?
Yeah, it would have been part of the original building. You can see the lath marks. See that's a strip right there? See the nail hole? They had the lath strips, same as this, except longer. And then the plaster will be slathered onto that. And then refined that way, so you can see where the plaster leaks through. That's typical, again, that's typical of almost any old building. Anything pre-1920 would have had that. So, okay, any questions? The fireplaces do work. Once we do programs here, we're hoping to do like open hearth cooking programs. Foodie programs are really in right now, so we want to take advantage of those.
I think you may have said this outside, but I forgot. What were these rooms?
The main living rooms.
So they just had 2 living rooms?
Yeah, one would probably had a table for a kitchen type, not a kitchen, but a dining room. And there probably were beds downstairs too. You have 12 plus to 15, 16 people living in this house. There's probably bed ticks all over the place. Roll them up in the daytime and roll them out at night. 3 fireplaces, or at least 2 originally. This place was been toasty warm. The 2 doors allow for ventilation. So you wonder why the 2 doors in a house this size. A lot of it's just I can open the doors up and you can get, people were afraid of diseases too, and they all thought fresh air was the best way to handle that. So you want to crack this place open as much as possible. So.
What would have been back here?
When we get back there, this was an addition added in 1918. It was a kitchen and a bathroom. So this door, and I'll show you from the back side, is probably put in at that same time. This doorway. I mentioned that door there being original. This is also original. This is the original door for that stair. It's very wide. They made everything very wide here. So if everybody want to head to the other.
Is the basement the entire area?
Now, yes. When you come into this side, you'll notice that the floor's a little bit more spongy. That's because we did not replace the floor joists on this side. They don't need to be replaced. We do know that the original floor, just like over there, is underneath, and you can see the edges of it back in this corner. We did replace the majority of the corner posts in this house. There's one that's still here. Again, there was just a lot of damage on this building. And what we try to do is we try to sister in. By sistering is a term for adding a piece of wood to an existing piece of wood. You don't tear it out, you just add something to it to make it stronger. And you'll see that we've done that, primarily over there, we've done that quite a bit. You'll see that girder that comes across, it looks kind of rough. It's structural, it'll hold the second floor. We didn't want to take it out because when you take out something like that, you're pretty much taking the house apart. And the second floor is 100% original, and we just did not want to mess with it. We were like, you know what? So what we'll do there is, Fritz, our carpenter, has come up with a genius way of using Bondo and sawdust to make a compound that we can pack that with, and then it'll harden and it'll be as hard as it was originally. You won't be able to tell because the sawdust takes the consistency of the wood, so. Here's a little bit of a smaller room. I mentioned the stair and how they pushed it back so they could get more room out of it. Check out how wide those planks are. Those are some huge trees. You just
Now, they would have had a sawmill there, or they did that by hand?
by hand, probably, what would you say, pit?
Yeah, probably pit saw.
Where you got a guy below in the pit, the guy above, and they've got a huge saw and they're just going back and forth with it.
Yeah.
The, also, and I'll mention it here, I didn't mention in the last two tours, you can kind of see it here. When you put the floors in, every time you get to a joist, each one, because they're hand sawn, are going to be a little bit off. So to get the floors to lay properly, you got to shake out around each joist. So that you lay one, you get the next one, you eyeball, you say, okay, how's it going to work? Then you come underneath them. Well, you take the board back down and you chisel away right where each joist meets. You can see it really well right here. See the highlights? And that's to make the floor level on top. That's a lot of work. That
Can you
was,
explain that again?
okay, I understand. See, this is the best place to see it probably. You can see the highlight where the wood looks like it's been gutted, it's been chiseled into. All of them, each one of them has, it starts about an inch away from the joist, and it carries through the joist, and it ends up about an inch away on the other side. What they'll do is they'll take a flat board, they'll go upstairs, they'll lay it down. If it fits, fine. If it's level with the floorboard they just put in, it's fine. Then they'll just nail it down. If not, they've got to come and they've got to chisel around it to make it work. So some are worse than others, but that's a byproduct of having the hand saw, and you can't get it exact. So you can even tell over here where because
Sorry,
we put them
just
back
turning
differently,
John's
they
hand
were tall uneven. And there's edges to it. We didn't put them back in the same spot that they were. And you'll see that in most houses. A house this size probably built by slaves. At least all of manual labor, cutting the wood and chiseling that out. It's all probably a lot that it was, at least some slave labor was involved. We have a house in Woodbridge, Ripon Lodge, where the owner had, his slaves were actually skilled carpenters, and he was a builder. It's ironic to me that we saved the house as a builder. But in the back you'll see that what I was mentioning before, the mud logging, that's the most complete section of the downstairs. And we've saved the mud, we've saved the slabs, we've saved the siding, and we're gonna patch any holes there, and that'll be completely open for folks to come and see in the future. This room here will be period furniture. Well, it'll be reproduction period furniture. We're really into letting kids sit on the furniture, hold the dishes, do the things. If they break it, we'll just buy another one type thing. We think it's a better way to learn history versus putting a stanchion up and saying, don't go back there. So we would rather have reproduction than actual antiques. Yeah, it's just a better way to learn, we think, and it's just.
These walls would be similar to what you have.
Yeah, they were all exactly the same. Yeah. We had to, again, a lot of the mud was missing, and then when we moved it, basically, in the places that we have it, other than there and there, we had to actually, it's almost like pulling a sheet off the table. We had plywood on it, pull the plywood up and slide siding on it at the same exact time so it didn't fall out. And that was like, I actually helped with that part. It was all hands on deck and just try to hold stuff in while we quickly put the siding up. Again, that's the most intact area of the first floor. At a certain point, probably, I don't know if it's as late as the 60s, probably the 40s or 50s, they put in kind of knotty pine wainscoting in here, in the whole house, and you see a piece of it left over against the stair. We'll leave that there as well. We had to tear that all out. We weren't going to put it back in. It's good for the 50s, but we weren't getting the 50s, so we just, that's unfortunately at the landfill a long time ago. Before we leave the room, I apologize we don't have a table in here, but we have a lot of really cool programs coming up. We have Tavern Night in Dumfries at the Williams Ordinary, and Bad Wolf Brewery out of Manassas actually makes beer for us that night.